On our 50th wedding anniversary, my husband David gave me divorce papers wrapped in a Tiffany box in front of 200 guests, while his 28-year-old mistress wore my mother's diamonds. That's when I remembered the safety deposit box he didn't know existed and the documents inside that would destroy everything he'd built. You spend half a century with someone, and you think you know them. You think the man who held your hand through childbirth, who cried at your daughter's wedding, who promised to grow old with you, actually meant those promises. But sometimes, the longest cons are played by the people who sleep beside us every night. My name is Barbara Coleman, and 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my entire marriage was a fraud. Not just the last few years when David became distant, but all 50 years. Every anniversary, every I love you, every single moment was part of a plan so calculating, so cruel, that when I finally understood it, I almost admired the genius of it. Almost. The party was David's idea. 50 years deserves something special, Barb, he'd said, using that smile that once made me weak in the knees. Now I know it was practiced in mirrors, perfected over decades of deception. The country club was decorated in gold and ivory, our wedding colours. Photos from 5 decades covered the walls. Our wedding, our children being born, family vacations, career milestones. A visual timeline of what I thought was love, but was actually a methodical extraction of everything I'd inherited from my family. Everyone was there. Our children, Jennifer and Robert, our grandchildren, my sister Louise, David's business partners, friends from the club. Even Judge Morrison, who'd married us 50 years ago, now 93 and still sharp as a razor. Ladies and gentlemen, David began his speech, champagne glass raised. 50 years ago, I married Barbara Henderson, the most beautiful woman in Boston. Polite applause. I smiled, playing my part as I'd been unconsciously playing it for 5 decades. She brought light into my life, David continued. She brought grace, dignity, and— he paused for effect. Significant family assets that helped build Coleman Industries into what it is today. Some nervous laughter. It was unusual for David to mention money so directly. Which is why, he said, pulling out a Tiffany box, I have something special for her today. The crowd leaned in. I stood up, expecting jewelry, maybe the emerald necklace I'd been hinting about. Instead, David handed me the box with a strange smile. Open it, darling. Inside, where jewelry should have been, were legal documents. The header read, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. The room went silent. I looked up at David, certain this was some terrible joke. I'm divorcing you, Barbara, he announced to the stunned crowd. After 50 years, I'm finally free to be with the woman I actually love. That's when she walked in. Melissa Chen, 28 years old, David's assistant for the past 3 years. She was wearing a white dress that looked like a wedding gown, and around her neck were my mother's diamonds, the ones that had supposedly been stolen in a break-in last year. You reported those stolen, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I did. From you, David smirked. Melissa deserves them more. After all, she's carrying my child. The gasps from the crowd were like physical blows. Jennifer, our daughter, stood up so fast her chair fell over. Dad, what the hell are you doing? I'm being honest for the first time in 50 years, David replied. Your mother and I haven't been in love for decades. We stayed together for appearances, for the business, for you kids. But now that Coleman Industries is going public next month, I don't need to pretend anymore. Going public. The IPO we'd been planning for 5 years. The one that would value the company at $2 billion. The company built with my inheritance. The timing is interesting, I said, still standing, still holding the divorce papers. It's strategic, David admitted without shame. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, but the prenup your father made us sign 50 years ago only covers assets brought into the marriage. Everything built during the marriage is mine. Ours, I corrected. No, Barbara. Mine. Coleman Industries is in my name. The patents are in my name. The contracts are in my name. You were a silent partner at best, a decorative one. Louise, my sister, started toward David, but I raised my hand to stop her. I needed to hear everything. I needed him to confess it all in front of witnesses. And Melissa? I asked, looking at the child wearing my mother's jewelry. Melissa is everything you're not, David said. Young, vibrant, innovative. She has an MBA from Wharton. She speaks 4 languages. She understands the business in ways you never could. She's 28. And brilliant. She's been helping me restructure the company for the IPO, hiding assets, creating offshore accounts, making sure that when we divorce, you get exactly what you deserve. Nothing. The faces around us were a mix of horror and fascination. This was better than any reality show. The perfect couple, the golden anniversary, turned into a public execution. Robert, our son, found his voice. Dad, you can't do this. Not like this. I can and I am. Your mother will be fine. She'll get the house, a generous monthly allowance, enough to maintain appearances. But the real money, the IPO money, that's mine and Melissa's. And your babies, Melissa added, rubbing her stomach with a satisfied smile. That's when I laughed. Not a bitter laugh or a hysterical laugh, but a genuine, amused laugh that seemed to confuse everyone, especially David. What's so funny, she don't? He's demanded. You are, I said, setting down the divorce papers. You honestly think you're the first person to try to con me? You think I survived 50 years in Boston society without learning how to protect myself? David's confidence flickered. What are you talking about? Tell me, David, when you were restructuring the company, did you ever wonder why some of the original patents weren't in the company files? His face went pale. What? Or why the Henderson Trust, my family's trust, required quarterly reports that only I could sign off on? The Henderson Trust was dissolved 30 years ago. No, darling. You were told it was dissolved. By me. After I caught you with your first mistress. The room was electric with tension. Melissa stepped forward. He said you were clueless about business. He said a lot of things. Most of them lies, like when he told me his parents were dead. They're not, by the way. They're in a nursing home in Florida that I've been paying for secretly for 20 years because David abandoned them when they became inconvenient. David started to speak, but I wasn't done. Or when he said he graduated from Harvard Business School. He didn't. He was expelled for plagiarism. I have the records. I've always had them. You're lying, David said, but his voice was shaking now. Am I? Check with Harvard. Oh, wait. You can't, because they banned you from campus. But I can, because I'm on the board of directors. Have been for 15 years. You never wondered why we always got invited to their events. I turned to address the crowd, these people who'd come to celebrate our golden anniversary, and were instead witnessing its demolition. My husband is right about one thing. Our marriage has been a business arrangement for decades. What he doesn't know is that I've been the one running the business. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text. Within seconds, the doors opened and 3 people entered. My lawyer, Martha Steinberg, my accountant, James Wu, and someone David clearly recognized but never expected to see. "Hello, David," the third man said. David went white. Thomas Coleman, David's younger brother, the one David had declared dead 15 years ago after a boating accident that conveniently removed him as a rival for their father's affection and modest inheritance. "Not dead," Thomas said cheerfully. "Just living in Switzerland, managing the Coleman Industries international patents that Barbara secretly transferred to my name 10 years ago." The divorce papers fell from David's hand. "That's impossible. Those patents are mine." "Were yours," Martha, my lawyer, corrected, "until you signed them over to Thomas during what you thought was a routine update to the company structure. Barbara had you sign so many papers that day, you never read them all." "That's fraud." "No, that's business. You taught me that, remember? Always read the fine print, Barb. Except you never followed your own advice when I was the one handing you the pen." The country club's ballroom had never been quieter. 200 of Boston's elite stood frozen, watching David Coleman's empire crumble in real time. Melissa, his pregnant mistress, had backed away from him like he was radioactive, which, financially speaking, he was about to be. "You can't do this," David said, his voice cracking. "I built this company." "With my money," I reminded him calmly. "My father's patents. My mother's connections. My inheritance that funded every startup cost." "You built nothing, David. You were just the face I put on my empire because in 1974, people wouldn't take a woman CEO seriously." James Wu, my accountant, opened his briefcase and began spreading documents across the head table right over our anniversary cake. "Mr. Coleman," James said formally, "as of 9 a.m. this morning, when you signed what you thought were divorce papers in your office, you actually signed a complete transfer of your remaining shares in Coleman Industries to the Henderson Trust, managed solely by Mrs. Barbara Coleman." David grabbed the papers from the Tiffany box, really reading them for the first time. His face went from pale to green. "These aren't divorce papers." "Page 47 is," Martha, my lawyer, said helpfully. "But pages 1 through 46 are various transfers, assignments, and relinquishments. You were so eager to humiliate Barbara that you signed everything without reading it. There's even a video of you laughing as you signed, saying, 'I can't wait to see her face.' Well, David, how's your face feeling now?" Melissa finally found her voice. "This is illegal. It's fraud. It's justice," I interrupted, "and completely legal. Every document was prepared by licensed attorneys, properly witnessed, and filed with the state. David was of sound mind and body when he signed them, as the video evidence shows." "Speaking of video evidence," Thomas, David's not-dead brother, said cheerfully, "Barbara, should we show them the Switzerland footage?" David's knees actually buckled. Robert and Jennifer, our children, caught him before he fell. "What Switzerland footage?" Jennifer asked, though she was looking at me, not her father. "Your father took a business trip to Zurich last month," I explained. "He thought he was setting up hidden accounts for after the divorce. He was actually being filmed by Swiss authorities investigating money laundering." "I never laundered money," David protested. "No, but you tried to," Thomas said. "You met with known criminals, discussed moving funds illegally, even signed preliminary agreements. Of course, the criminals were actually Swiss federal agents, and I was recording everything from the next table." "You set me up." "You set yourself up," I corrected. "I just made sure there were cameras rolling when you did it." The crowd was starting to murmur. Phones were coming out. and I knew this would be all over Boston society social media within hours. Good. David had wanted a public humiliation. He was getting one. "Mom," Robert said quietly, "how long have you known?" "About Melissa?" "3 years." "About the others?" "Decades." "Others?" Jennifer gasped. "Oh, yes. Melissa is just the latest. There was Patricia in the 90s, Sandra in the 80s, and Margaret in the late 70s, each one younger than the last. Each one promised marriage after he divorced me. Each one eventually discarded when they got too old, meaning over 30. Melissa was staring at David now with dawning horror. "You said I was special. You said you'd never felt this way before." "Welcome to the club, dear," I said, not unkindly. "We meet on Thursdays." "Yes, literally. Patricia, Sandra, and I have coffee every Thursday to laugh about what an idiot we were to believe him." "You're friends with his exes?" "Why wouldn't I be? We have so much in common. We all fell for the same con man. The only difference is I married him first, so I had time to protect myself." Judge Morrison, 93 years old and sharp as ever, stood up slowly. "Barbara, are you saying your entire marriage was a sham?" "No, Your Honor. The first 2 years were real, before David discovered exactly how much money I'd inherited, before he realized that my trust fund was worth more than his entire family's assets combined, before he started planning how to steal it all." "How do you know it was only 2 years?" the judge asked. I pulled out a small leather journal, worn with age. "Because I found this in his mother's attic when we were cleaning it out. His diary from 1976. Would you like me to read the relevant passage?" David lunged for the journal, but Thomas blocked him. "I think everyone would love to hear it," Thomas said. I opened to a bookmarked page and read in David's own words, "Barbara is perfect. Too trusting, too naive, and too rich. Her father's patents alone are worth millions. If I play this right, I'll never have to work again. I just have to pretend to love her long enough to get control of everything. Then I can live my real life." The sound Jennifer made was somewhere between a sob and a scream. "You never loved us?" "Any of us?" David looked at his children, and for the first time all evening showed what might have been genuine emotion. "I loved you two. You were never part of the plan. But Mum was. But Mum was." He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Louise, my sister, finally spoke up. "Barbara, why didn't you divorce him years ago when you found out?" "Because divorce would have meant splitting assets. This way I got everything. Plus, I wanted to wait until he showed his true colors publicly. I wanted everyone to see what I've seen for decades." "This is insane," David shouted. "You can't just steal my company. Your company." I laughed. "David, Coleman Industries doesn't exist anymore. As of this morning, it's been absorbed into Henderson Holdings, my family's company that you thought was defunct. Turns out, I've been running both companies for years. You just signed the final merger papers. The IPO will still happen. But for Henderson Holdings, not Coleman Industries, the investment bankers have already been notified. They're thrilled, actually. Henderson Holdings has much better financials." Melissa stepped forward, one hand on her pregnant belly. "What about my baby?" "David's baby. If it's David's baby, it will be provided for. I've set up a trust fund, but given David's history of lying about everything, I'd suggest a paternity test." "You bitter old—" "Careful," Martha warned. "Defamation is still illegal, and we're recording everything." David sank into a chair, the fight going out of him. "What do you want, Barbara?" I wanted a real marriage. I wanted a husband who loved me for me, not my money. I wanted 50 years of genuine partnership. But since I couldn't have that, I'll settle for justice. So what happens now? He asked, looking every one of his 73 years. Now you get what you wanted. A divorce. But on my terms. You'll receive the same monthly allowance you planned to give me. Enough to maintain appearances, as you so eloquently put it. The house in Boston goes to the children, the vacation homes, the cars, the club memberships, all mine. I'll be ruined. You'll be exposed. There's a difference. Thomas stepped forward. Actually, there's one more thing. Dad's nursing home called. They wanted to thank whoever's been paying anonymously for his care all these years. I told them it was Barbara. David's face crumbled. My father's alive? Barely. Dementia took him years ago. But yes, alive. In the best facility in Florida, thanks to your wife. The wife you just tried to publicly humiliate and financially destroy. Why? David asked me. Why would you take care of my father when I… Because that's what family does, I said simply. Real family. Not the fake family you've been pretending to have for 50 years. The room was starting to empty, guests fleeing the awkwardness like it was contagious. But I wasn't done. Not quite. David, there's one more thing you should know. Remember our prenup, the one my father made us sign? He nodded numbly. Read clause 47, the infidelity clause. It states that if either party commits adultery, they forfeit all claims to marital assets. That was declared unenforceable in most states, yes. But not in Massachusetts, not when both parties are represented by counsel and sign willingly. You had your lawyer review it, remember? He said it was ironclad. But you'd have to prove adultery. I smiled and pulled out my phone, showing him a photo. It was him and Melissa in a very compromising position, taken in his office last week. Your security company reports to me, David. Has for years. I have photos, videos, audio recordings, 3 years' worth with Melissa alone. Melissa grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm out of here. Melissa, wait, David called after her. For what? You're broke, you're old, and you're a liar. I can do better. She left, taking David's last shred of dignity with her. The ballroom was nearly empty now. Just family, lawyers, and Judge Morrison remained. Barbara, the judge said, that was quite a performance. It wasn't a performance, Your Honor. It was 50 years in the making. The next morning, Boston Herald's headline read, Coleman Industries collapses. Wife reveals 50-year con at anniversary party. By noon, it had gone national. By evening, David Coleman was the most hated man in Massachusetts. I sat in my study, really my study now, not the one I'd pretended belonged to David, reviewing the final paperwork with Martha, my lawyer. The room felt different without the weight of deception. Lighter, cleaner. The divorce will be finalized in 90 days, Martha said. Given the evidence of adultery and fraud, David won't get a penny beyond the monthly allowance you've graciously offered. $2,000 a month, I confirmed. The same amount he gave his parents when he stuck them in that rat-infested home before I moved them to a better facility. He's hired Bradley McCourt to represent him. I laughed. Bradley? The same Bradley who David cheated out of a partnership 20 years ago. This should be interesting. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Jennifer and Robert standing on the porch with their families. My grandchildren, 7-year-old Emma and 5-year-old James, were holding flowers. Grandma! Emma ran to hug me as soon as I opened the door. We brought you flowers because Daddy said you're sad. I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm free. Jennifer's eyes were red from crying. Mum, can we talk? We gathered in the living room, the same room where David had proposed to me 51 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. How did you do it? Robert asked. How did you pretend for 50 years? I didn't pretend, darling. I loved your father. The problem was, he never loved me back. When I realized that, I had two choices: be a victim or be a strategist. I chose strategy. But all those family dinners, those Christmases, those vacations were real for me. Every moment with you children, with the grandchildren's, those were genuine. My love for family was never fake. Only David's was. Jennifer pulled out a photo album. Look at this. Dad's smiling in every picture. How can you fake that for 50 years? The same way he faked everything else. Practice. I don't understand how we didn't see it, Robert said. Because children shouldn't have to look for deception in their parents. You trusted him. That's not a weakness. It's what normal people do. Are you going to be okay, Mum? Jennifer asked. Financially, I mean. Martha laughed. Your mother is worth approximately $2.8 billion after the IPO goes through next month. She'll be fine. My children's jaws dropped. Billion? Robert squeaked. Your grandfather was a genius inventor, I explained. His patents have been the backbone of the tech industry for 30 years. Your father just took credit for managing them. But I was the one who knew which technologies to invest in, which companies to partner with, which innovations to fund. Dad always said you didn't understand business. And I let him say it. Every time he underestimated me, I gained another advantage. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Thomas, David's brother, carrying a box of files. Barbara, I found these in David's office safe. You need to see them. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Contracts, agreements, and most shocking of all, a life insurance policy on me for $50 million taken out just last month. He was planning to kill me, I said, surprisingly calm. Thomas nodded grimly. The policy was set to activate after your anniversary. If you'd accepted those divorce papers, if you'd gone home defeated and humiliated. An accident would have happened, I finished. Jennifer grabbed the papers, reading them with growing horror. This beneficiary, who's M. Chen? Melissa, I said. His mistress. He was going to kill you for her. For money. It was always about money. Robert stood up, pacing. We have to call the police. Already done, Martha said. They're arresting him this afternoon. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was David, calling from jail. Barbara, please. You have to help me. They're charging me with conspiracy to commit murder. I put him on speaker. You took out a life insurance policy on me, David. It was just financial planning. With Melissa as the beneficiary. Silence. Goodbye, David. Wait, Barbara, I'm sorry. No, you're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. I hung up and blocked his number. 50 years of marriage ended with the push of a button. Later that evening, Louise, my sister, came over with wine and wisdom. You know what the most impressive part is? She said, pouring generous glasses. You never let him break you. 50 years of lies, and you're still standing. I had to be. For the children, for the grandchildren, for myself. What will you do now? Live, really live. Travel, start a foundation. Maybe even date someone who actually likes me for me. Louise laughed. At 72? Why not? I've got money, freedom, and according to my doctor, excellent health. David, on the other hand, is facing 20 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and money laundering. The Switzerland thing was brilliant. Thank you. Though I have to give credit to Thomas. He's the one who suggested using David's greed against him. Where is Thomas staying? Here, actually. I've invited him to move into the guest house. He's been living in exile for 15 years because David convinced him the family hated him. Turns out, David told him I was dead. He told his brother you were dead. He told everyone in his family I was dead. His parents spent the last 20 years thinking their son was a widower. That's why they never tried to contact me. The doorbell rang again. This time it was unexpected. Melissa Chen, no longer pregnant-looking, standing in the rain. "May I come in?" she asked. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She was carrying a small suitcase and looked like she'd been crying for hours. I wasn't pregnant, she admitted immediately. It was padding. David's idea. He said it would make the divorce more sympathetic. I know, I said. The private investigator I hired told me weeks ago. You knew? I know everything, dear, including the fact that you're actually 34, not 28, and that you were married before. To Richard Coleman. Louise gasped. David's cousin? Melissa nodded. He died 3 years ago, mysteriously. Left me nothing because David had convinced him to change his will. That's when I realized what David was. So you decided to con him. I decided to get justice. But then I fell for him. God help me, I actually fell for his act. I studied her for a moment. This woman who'd worn my mother's diamonds, who'd stood beside my husband as he tried to destroy me. The diamonds, I said. Where are they? She pulled them from her purse, handing them over. I'm sorry. For everything. I thought I was playing him, but he was playing me too. He played everyone. That was his gift. What will you do to me, Phil? Melissa asked. Nothing. You're not worth the energy. But if you're smart, you'll leave Boston tonight and never come back. She stood to leave, then turned back. How did you survive it? 50 years of knowing he didn't love you? I had children who did. I had friends who did. I had a life beyond David Coleman. He was just a roommate who happened to share my bed. The real tragedy would have been if I'd actually needed his love. After she left, Louise raised her glass. To Barbara Coleman, who played the longest con of all. Henderson, I corrected. Barbara Henderson. I'm taking my maiden name back. To Barbara Henderson, then, who beat a con man at his own game. We clinked glasses as my phone buzzed with news alerts. David's arrest was trending. The IPO was still on track. My children were giving interviews about their father's deception. But the best message came from an unexpected source. Patricia, Sandra, and Margaret, David's former mistresses. We heard what happened. Drinks Thursday to celebrate? Your fellow survivors. I texted back. Absolutely. My treat. We've earned it. 3 months later, I stood in a Boston courthouse, watching David be sentenced to 15 years in prison. He looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, older, defeated. When his eyes met mine, I saw something I'd never seen before. Regret. Real regret. Not for what he'd done, but for getting caught. Mrs. Henderson, the judge addressed me. Would you like to make a victim impact statement? I stood. Your Honor, I was a victim for exactly 2 years. The other 48, I was a survivor. David Coleman taught me that trust is earned, not given, that love without respect is just manipulation, and that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's success. Do you forgive him? No. Forgiveness is for people who deserve it. David deserves exactly what he's getting: a small cell, a narrow bed, and 15 years to think about how a naive 22-year-old girl he married for money ended up owning everything he thought was his. As they led David away, he turned back one last time. Barbara, I did love you. In the beginning. No, David. You loved the idea of me. Young, rich, and stupid. The problem was, I was only two of those things. The courtroom erupted in laughter, and David Coleman disappeared into the prison system, taking his delusions with him. Today, I'm 73 years old, worth $2.8 billion, and finally free. I travel the world with my sister, spoil my grandchildren, and run the Barbara Henderson Foundation for financial abuse victims. Every Thursday, I have coffee with Patricia, Sandra, Margaret, and now Melissa. We call ourselves the Coleman Survivors Club. We laugh about what fools we were, but also about what warriors we became. Jennifer and Robert have adapted to the truth about their father. It wasn't easy, but they're in therapy, working through 50 years of lies. The grandchildren just know that Grandpa did bad things and had to go away. Thomas runs the company now, brilliantly. He has his brother's charisma, but none of his cruelty. And David? He writes me letters from prison, still trying to manipulate, still trying to con. I return them unopened with a note. No longer at this address. Try hell. My name is Barbara Henderson. I was married to a con man for 50 years. He thought he was playing me, but I was playing him. He wanted my money, but I took his life. Not literally, but legally, financially, and completely. The moral of this story? When someone shows you who they are, believe them. But more importantly, never show them who you really are until you're ready to destroy them with it. Game over. I won.